Welcome in to the Voice of College Football with Texas. I am your host, Joshua, and I am joined by Matthew. Today, we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Matthew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for the season. First weekend of college football. I think it's going to be a really good game too with Iowa State and Kansas State. So looking forward to that. And then obviously the big showdown with Texas and Ohio State next weekend.
For sure. We have a lot of things we want to talk about. One of the things we are going to talk about today, we have some predictions we're going to be doing, talk about the SEC, college football playoffs, some Texas predictions. We're also going to be going over some of the Texas Longhorns that are in the NFL, as well as talk about some key freshmen and some breakouts. So, Matthew, where do you want to start?
Let's start with some, I guess, 5 breakout players that you see for this Texas team this year. I think that'd be an interesting place to start.
Yes. So I have 5 breakouts candidates that we can go over today. And I think for each specific reason, these guys are all really interesting in their own ways. So let's break it down one by one. My first one is Jelani McDonald. I think for him, I'm expecting him to have a bigger role this upcoming season. He's always sort of had to play almost sort of second fiddle to Jahdae Barron these past 2 years. But this year, he's going to be in for a much bigger role. He could play all over the field, whether it's in the nickel, whether he wants to play on the outside. I see his probable role probably being often on the outside, but I think occasionally he will have to play in that nickel position, and I think he's going to be in for a big year. What say you?
No, I don't disagree with that. I think he's going to have a really big season. I think the news coming out of camp, like recently, especially, it seems to be the rotation of Derek Williams, Michael Taff, and Jelani McDonald changing between the safety and the nickel spot. Derek Williams mostly staying at safety, and then Michael Taff and Jelani McDonald switching from nickel to safety. So I don't disagree with that. My number 5 guy is Alex January. I've been high on Alex January since he stepped on campus, and you've seen like his name being thrown in the mention of like the top 3 guys. I think it's either going to be him, Murad Watson, and then someone like Cole Brevard starting probably for Texas at the interior at the defensive tackle spot. And I'm really high on Alex January. So I think he's going to have a really big year for Texas. And he's someone, freshman year came in and people would say, hey, look at Colin Simmons, how good he is. And then other people would be like, hell, well, who's this other Duncanville guy? And I think this is his year to show out and become a guy that's kind of, known on the public scene for college football.
Yeah, I also had Alex January written down, so I'll probably add it to somebody else. But I kind of said the same thing as you. I think so far this camp, he has been one of the most consistently dominant of your interior defensive linemen. And we have a lot of talent in that interior with a bunch of the transfers we brought in. You mentioned Cole Brevard, Murad Watson, Travis Shaw. Even have some guys like Harold Canoe, who I actually heard some pretty good things about lately. And some of the younger rookies, too, the Josiah Sharmas of the world, the Myron Charles. Alex January looks to be the guy that's probably next up in that interior, and I think he's going to be in for a big year. My next one I said was Ty Anthony Smith. I think obviously you have Anthony Hill, who is like the ultimate weapon. You can put him off the edge. You can set him on some blitzes. He could just do everything you need in an off-ball linebacker. But I think you also need a bit of like a curveball there, a change of pace guy. And I think Ty Anthony Smith could be that different player compared to what Anthony Hill is. Anthony Hill is bigger, stronger, more seasoned. Anthony Smith gives you a bit more of those flashy plays that you're looking for. And I know you have Leon Lafau, but I do think that Anthony Smith is just a different player than him. I think he has a higher upside to him. So I put Anthony Smith as being that next breakout candidate.
I don't disagree with that. Again, another guy that you hear a lot about in the camp. I think he was talked about today by Anthony Hill, actually in the media availability from the players. Yes. Talk about how like he has to kind of fly around more than everyone else because he's kind of small, which he is. Like last year, I think he was like listed at like 215 or something crazy like that, and he was playing linebacker. So I have one too. I have Leongo Lafau. I think Leongo Lafau is kind of like forgotten in this linebacker room because now everyone wants to kind of move on to Ty Anthony Smith, and then Leongo Lafau. We forget took over David Benda's job at the end of the season last year because he's a really good football player, all around solid. He doesn't do anything, I think, fantastic, but he's just good at everything. He's good in the run game. He's good in pass coverage. Maybe get to the quarterback a little bit better. That'd be the one thing that I think he needs to work on, but that's kind of why you have Ty Anthony Smith. I think he can be really good at that, but I think Leongo Lafau is a guy that could break out for Texas this year.
Yeah, Lafau, his X factor is that he's just unbelievably smart. He's just a smart player that always seems to be in the right position. He's not like a really physical player that's going to come downhill and move offensive linemen, and he's not going to make these big flashy plays. I think that's why you would want a Ty Anthony Smith to be a bit more of that flashier guy. He's the guy that's going to get all the media credit, but in the locker room, Lafau is going to be the guy that gets a lot of the credit because he's the one that's racking up the hard plays out there. So those two kind of being paired next to each other should be a whole lot of fun. Also, Trey Moore's in that room as well, and he's a veteran who can do all sorts of things that you want out there. My next breakout candidate is Parker Livingstone. This one is kind of low-hanging fruit here. He's been all over the landscape of the media. He's obviously has a great connection with Arch. And for me, when I look at the receiving core, Emmett Mosley hasn't quite been able to get his feet too wet because he's been dealing with some injuries. Ryan Wingo is sort of like your big play threat. He might only see the ball, 6 or 7 times, but of those 6 or 7 targets, he's going to take, 4 for 80 yards and a touchdown. He's going to make all those big splashy plays. DeAndre Moore can play all over the field. He can win downfield a little bit, but then there's Parker Livingstone. And I don't want to make the lofty comparison to, Shipley, but in some ways, McCoy and Shipley was such a great connection. And it was just sort of like a safety blanket for him that he knew exactly where he was going to be at. I could see a world where Arch needs that safety blanket, especially early on. And you could see a world where Livingstone is just consistently getting open, finding separation. And maybe the biggest thing is just understanding his quarterback, where he wants him to be, how he wants him to angle routes. And I think Livingstone could, be the guy. We've heard a lot of great things in training camp so far.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting who steps into that number 3 wide receiver role. I think that could definitely be Parker Livingstone. I think it is funny you compared him to Jordan Shipley a little bit. He is roommates with Arch Manning as well, so kind of fits in that mold. I'm going to go with a guy that was injured last year, and that's Christian Clark. I think Christian Clark is going to have a really good year for Texas. I actually thought it was going to be a bigger year before all the positive stuff about CJ Baxter, but I still expect him to have a really big year. I think he's probably the second most talented guy if CJ Baxter is fully healthy. I think he's the most talented guy if CJ Baxter is like 80 or 90%. He's a guy that I really like coming out of high school. It's weird because he was, below Jarrett Gibson recruiting rankings, but I think he's a better running back than Jarrett Gibson all around. I think he can do a little bit of everything. And it's just a weird thing, guys. If you look at good, solid running backs, look at their legs. Christian Clark has tree trunks for legs. They are huge. I think he's going to be a really good player for Texas. I expect him to have 500, maybe even 600 rushing yards this year for Texas and, 7, 8, 9, 10 touchdowns.
Do you think, in connection with Clark here, do you think the overall depth of this room could impact his production? Because you do have a Trey Wisner who likely will be your lead back to at least start the season off. And we've been hearing a lot of good things about Baxter. I think Gibson got his feet a little bit wet last year. Do you think that could potentially hurt Clark, or do you think Clark is just going to be almost undeniable in a way?
So before, that's the thing. I made the prediction about 2 weeks ago that I thought we'd have 3 guys with 400 rushing yards or more. As that was Christian Clark, CJ Baxter, and Trey Wisner, just because I think that's how this season's going to be. I don't think we're going to have a lead back, mostly because CJ Baxter is coming back from injury, Christian Clark coming back from injury. And I like Trey Wisner, but to me, he's not a number 1 on a championship team for running back wise. So I do think Christian Clark is super talented, but the thing is, it's again down to CJ Baxter's health. I don't know what he's going to be, because 2 weeks ago I thought this is going to be a slow roll, and then all of a sudden, even Steve Sarkisian is like, you know what, I'm going to be a lot more aggressive with him than I thought because of what I've seen. So I'm like, I don't really know where to go from here with this running back room because of that.
Yeah, it's a deep room, and there's so much talent in this room. The competition is going to be incredibly high. I kind of am in a similar spot here to you. I don't think there's going to be a singular guy that's just, your 3-down back like a Bijan used to be, or, I guess you have Roshan, but, Bijan could have been that 3-down guy. I don't really have that guy. Trey Wisner can be used in the passing game in first down, second down situations, and then Baxter can be used, whenever you really need him to. Awesome pass protector. Obviously coming back from injury, so he's not as explosive as he used to be. But once that explosiveness comes back, then his role should be expanded. Gibson had some fumbling issues, but he's just a bull out there. He's big, he's strong, wants to run over people, and then Clark can just kind of do everything else. It's unfortunate he had the injury last year, because I think Clark, he would have had a sizable role last year given the injuries we had in that room. So yeah, Christian Clark's a great one. My next, I actually have 2 offensive linemen to round out my list, so I'll kind of clump them into one. I have Trevor Goosby and I have DJ Campbell. DJ, it's hard to call him a breakout candidate when he's, I guess, now a senior, but he hasn't quite had I don't want to call it a career that lives up to the 5-star, because he's had an awesome career so far for Texas, but he hasn't necessarily broken out to become a guy that could be projected in the first 2 days of the draft, right? He's always been somebody who maybe he gets into somewhere in the day 3, right? I think this is the year, though, where, it's now your 4th year with the program, your 4th year under Sark. Everything is now kind of put on your shoulders to be the leader in the locker room, because you have such a young offensive line around you. And, a veteran in the center position with Cole Hudson, who I think will probably start there. So I think this is a big year for DJ Campbell to prove that he can be a future top pick in the NFL draft. He's got all the talent. He's strong, athletic. He moves well, never really has any injury concerns. And I think this could be a big year for him. And then for Trevor Goosby, look, this is like, I would say Goosby's probably the next man up to be the next top tackle taken out of the draft. I mean, he is an athletic freak. He's such a well-sized guy. We saw last year in minimal playing time that he held his own in multiple high stakes games. And I think him playing at left tackle, that's the blind side of a quarterback. He's going to be tasked with some really difficult matchups in the SEC. And if he can prove his worth, I would not be surprised at all if Goosby works his way into a top pick in next year's draft or potentially in the future.
No, I don't disagree. And I agree with DJ Campbell. We've talked about him a lot on this channel, how I think he's the highest rated interior offensive lineman of the past 5 years, like out of high school. And he has not lived up to that. Like you said, he's been a solid football player. He's probably about a 5th round pick in the NFL if he comes out last year. But I mean, we've seen him be replaced by Cole Hudson in the middle of football games. If you're that guy, that should not be happening to you. So I agree. And then Trevor Goosby, I'm in love with. Like, the Texas A&M game sold me. I think it was in the third quarter. You kind of don't even really notice Kelvin Banks is out. Like, they shoot to Kelvin Banks on the sideline. Like, oh crap, I kind of forgot this guy's out because Trevor Goosby is holding both Stewart guys out, and Nick Scourton. Didn't hear about any of those guys during that game because Trevor Goosby has been fantastic. And I agree. I think Trevor Goosby is going to be a really good football player, and he was another guy for me that I was going to have as a breakout player. So I completely agree with that. That's the thing too. There's a real argument to be made if Trevor Goosby is playing versus Ohio State instead of Cam Williams. That I think that game probably goes to overtime because I think Trevor Goosby is a better football player than Cam Williams is right now. Cam Williams, I think, has like really high upside. I wish he would have come back, but that's a whole different discussion. But I completely agree. I have Trevor Goosby in there as well. And then this guy's already kind of broken out, but he hasn't broken out for Texas, and most people don't know who he is. Like, we had an Ohio State preview show like 3 months ago, an early preview show, and I mentioned Jack Endries, and neither of the Ohio State guys knew who he was because guess what? He played for Cal. People are going to know who Jack Endries is this year. I said I was the number one driver of this train. I said 4 months ago on this channel, hey, this guy's going to have the best season in the history of Texas football for the tight end position. I fully believe that. I think he has all the tools to be able to do that. I think you're looking at a 600-yard guy with 7, 8, 9+ touchdowns. I think that's how good he can be.
Yeah, I mean, he had 623 yards, 56 receptions last year, and that's with Cal. He was playing with Fernando Mendoza, who's now with, I think, Indiana. Solid quarterback prospect, by the way. Yeah, I mean, look, this is the most talented team he's ever been on, and with all the plethora of weapons the Longhorns have, it's reasonable to assume that a guy like Jack Andrews will be the lead guy in that room. I also want to say, this was not something I wrote down, but it just kind of popped in my head. Jordan Washington could also be a breakout candidate too. He's got all the talent in the world, just some little nuanced things he's got to work out. But, Jack Andrews will be that number one tight end, but whenever you run 12 personnel, you're probably going to see a lot of Jordan Washington out there. So those two are going to make for a really fun tight end duo. And we know Texas really values tight ends. JT Sanders, last year Gunnar Helm. I can see Jack Andrews easily being that next man up and maybe even potentially the best tight end of the Sark era.
I definitely see that. Like, Gunnar Helm was drafted in the 4th round. Now, do I think he was underdrafted? Absolutely. I think Jack Andrews gets drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty good segue. Do you have any other breakout candidates you want to talk about before we talk about some of these other things?
No, that's it.
Okay, cool. So kind of doing a quick little segue here. 2025 drafted Longhorns. Some of them did not play in week 2 of the preseason, but there was a couple of standouts. I have 4 standouts. Quinn Ewers, 11 of 17, 116 yards and 2 touchdowns after a really rough first game there against the with the Miami Dolphins. He comes back, has a really nice game, leads 2 touchdown drives. Did you get the chance to watch it? And if you did, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I did. And I was very impressed. And anyone that watches like Quinn in college, he kind of did the same thing. When it was up and down, when he was down, he kind of turned it around the next week. I was never concerned with him. Like, I think Tua mentioned that in a press conference of, hey, this guy's always calm no matter what. He's just going to be calm. And you saw that. He played very well. Still, the pocket awareness, that's like the number one thing for me. If he can just solve that, I think he'll be fine because he has everything else going for him. He has a pretty good arm. He's very accurate, and he anticipates throws very well. Like, that's the number one trait, in my opinion, and he fits very well in that system. Now the question is, I don't think he's going to win the backup job, does he do enough this week or whenever they play again to secure the roster spot? I think that's the question. I don't know if they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, my assumption is they will. I think they drafted him, and I think he's just a perfect fit within the system that they're going to run there. Question I think now is, how much longer is McDaniel going to be the head coach there? There's a lot of questions in Miami, and McDaniel could be the scapegoat. But yeah, nice bounce back game from Quinn. He did not look good in that first game. You talked about pocket presence. I think he had 2 fumble lost and just way less than 50% completion percentage. This time though, a lot more efficient, looked a little bit more calm. The pocket presence is still a complete work in progress. It's something that he just has never looked really ever good at. I mean, even at Texas his entire time there. So hopefully he could take a big step up. Andrew Makuba, a massive day for the Eagles. 1 tackle, a 75-yard pick 6 against Dylan Gabriel. He also had a fumble recovery in there as well. Sort of a weird interception where Dylan is rolling out left. 2 guys have their hands out, and Makuba just kind of goes right in the middle of them, steals the ball out of their hand, 75 yards, and great little showcase there. The Eagles get another great talent. Makuba is a perfect fit for what they need there, and he's going to be a great player for them.
Yeah, I mean, he just has instincts for the ball. Like, that's what he did at Texas. Yep. Wherever the ball is, he finds it. And if someone has the ball, he's going to hit you, and he's going to hit you super hard. And the Eagles, again, do it well. I mean, this guy, what's crazy is people don't talk about this. This guy wasn't a starter here at Texas before Derek Williams got hurt. Like, Derek Williams got hurt, and then he became a starter, which is crazy to say. But this guy is a phenomenal football player, someone, like I said, has a nose for the football. And it's funny, intercepted Dylan Gabriel because I'm not a fan of Dylan Gabriel. I could not believe the Browns drafted him in the 3rd round. And, he kind of proved the point there with that interception for me. So,
yeah, Dylan is, they've just announced that Flacco will be the starting quarterback. So to any of the people who wanted Sanders there, probably not going to happen. Next, I have Jahdae Barron. He had 4 tackles on the day. I thought he looked sharp in coverage. It wasn't really tested too often. Barron's in a ideal situation there in Denver where he gets to play, after the preseason, of course, alongside Patrick Surtain, who can basically lock down an entire side of the field. And the Denver Broncos sort of have this fun little task here of figuring out, okay, is Barron going to play a safety? Is he going to play in the nickel? Do we want to play him on the outside? They have a lot of talent in that secondary, but I think Jahdae Barron is probably the 2nd best talent alongside Pat Surtain. And I thought he looked pretty good in that preseason game.
Yeah, as someone who's a Broncos fan and a Texas fan, I think it's awesome. Well, first off, we have 6 Longhorns on the team, which is awesome. Second, it was awesome that we got like one of my favorite players ever to watch at Texas just because of how smart he is playing football. Like, I don't think he's the most athletic guy. I think he trained really hard for that 40 to get that time. I don't think he really runs like a 4.3. But he's super smart, knows where the football is at all times or where he should be. And then he's just physical. Like, that's the thing. Why he was so perfect for the nickel and so good at the line of scrimmage is because when he comes downhill, he doesn't miss tackles because he's not afraid to put his nose in there. And we saw that in the preseason. He came downhill, forget who the Cardinals player was, but got him down. The guy's trying to stiff arm him off and he brought him to the ground. The question now is on Broncos Twitter, is it going to be Jaquan McMillan at nickel or is it going to be Jahdae Barron? It's kind of split 50-50 right now. Jaquan McMillan's a really good football player. So I don't really have any issues with the rotation there to see what happens. Riley Moss, I'm going to be honest, hit or miss for him. I mean, that Bengals game still hurts me to watch. He got absolutely killed by T. Higgins that whole game. And the best thing about this is I no longer have to watch Levi Wallace, who got absolutely destroyed in the Browns game and gave up like 200 yards receiving to Jerry Jeudy. That will not be happening with Jahdae Barron at cornerback.
Yeah. So as our local Denver fan, do you have a preference? Would you want to see him play on the outside over Moss, or do you want to see him stick inside at nickel and maybe replace Jaquan McMillan, who didn't have the greatest year last year, but is a pretty solid talent?
Yeah, so I think it's depending on the scheme you're going against offensively. If it's a more run-heavy scheme, I actually probably would put Jahdae Barron at the nickel because, come down to the physicality. But if you're going against like the Bengals again, yes, I want Jahdae Barron outside because I trust him more versus T. Higgins than I do Riley Moss. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Riley Moss improves, which is definitely possible. But he struggled down the stretch for Denver last year.
Yeah, totally fair. So Gunnar Helm, we just talked about him a little bit earlier. 4 catches for 48 yards and a nice touchdown catch. I think that one I don't think it was from Cam Ward. I can't quite remember, but I thought he had a nice day. He looked solid in run blocking as well. And made a couple of nice catches. He had a couple of nice catches the last week too. So he's having a nice little camp. There's some competition in that room that might maybe not make him the starter, but if they do run some 12 personnel, Helm will get a lot of opportunities. And I think probably within the next 3 years, he'll probably be the starting tight end for Tennessee.
No, I completely agree. I think he had 4 catches for like 55 to 60 yards or something like that and a touchdown. So really, really good second week from him. Like you said, it's going to be a competition there wide open. I think there's 3 guys competing for that starting spot. So it'll be interesting if he does win it, and they get to play my Broncos early. So it's going to be interesting how Cam Ward does. I mean, that's a really hard test. I think first game is versus the Broncos defense. We'll see how Gunnar Helm and Cam Ward do, but I agree. I think Gunnar Helm and Barron Sorrell, to me, were the most underdrafted players from this Texas class, in my opinion. I think Gunnar Helm's going to be a really good football player in the NFL.
Yeah. Speaking of the Titans, they have the Broncos in week 1. Then they got to go up against Jared Verse and all those Florida State guys against the LA Rams in week 2. So welcome to the NFL, Cam Ward. It only gets much harder from here on out. And, we saw Kelvin Banks. Bryce, the coach, talked about it. Banks looked great. Yeah, we talked about it on the last Tuesday live stream. Me and Brandon described it as it looks like he's gliding. And we saw that at Texas. Whenever he gets into his drop back, it doesn't like there are certain guys that look like it feels unnatural to him. It feels like robotic in a way. Cam Williams kind of struggled with that a little bit last year for Texas.
Yeah.
And part of that's just because of just how big he is. For Banks, he is like the perfectly well-built tackle to where he's athletic enough to just sort of glide back there. And his positioning of his body, his punch, everything about him is just so pure. And his relationship alongside that left guard is always pivotal, especially when you're doing a lot of zone run schemes, which is what the Saints are going to be doing a whole lot this year. He looked really smooth out there. He looked great. It's a shame he's on the Saints because the Saints don't look very good this year, but Kelvin Banks will definitely be a bright spot for them.
Yeah, I think he was just the highest rated so far offensive lineman of the whole preseason. I think he's got like an 88.6 grade or something crazy like that. So I'm not surprised. Him and Will Campbell getting talked about the way they did going into the draft was crazy to me. Like, I know measurables weren't perfect on either of those guys, especially Will Campbell's arm length and everything, but just turn on the tape. Like, they played in the SEC and they were freaking good their whole 4 years, and they started since they were freshmen. Or 3 years. I don't really care what their measurables are at that point, because guess what? They're going against NFL guys week after week, and they were just fine.
Yeah, and one of the knocks on Banks was that Georgia game where Jalen Walker had a couple of sacks, but like most of those sacks, if not every single play he made, was on Quinn Ewers. It was not on Kelvin Banks. That one sack that he had way deep almost in the end zone, that was Quinn's fault. That was not Kelvin Banks' fault. So, the knocks on Banks and even Will Campbell to an extent were a little ridiculous, but so far those guys have looked good. We haven't talked about Barron Sorrell. He looked okay out there. Isaiah Bond just got signed by the Cleveland Browns, so congrats to him. And Matthew Golden did not play, and Jaden Blue has not played so far either. As a Cowboys fan, I hope that he can, because he's going to play a big role for this team, because the running back room for Dallas is pretty pathetic. That's it for the 2025 draft of Longhorns. They all looked good out there. They look like they're all primed for a solid rookie season. No injuries so far to any of these guys, which is important, except for Jaden Blue. He's going to be returning here soon. So everything looks good. And do you have any other things you want to say about that?
No, I agree. I'm in love with Matthew Golden. There are people, in the Texas space that said, he's not going to be that good when he got here. He's going to be a special teams guy. And I just thought that was crazy. And he's going to be great for the Packers. I hate his number, but he's going to be great for the Packers.
Yeah. What is he, 22?
Yeah, 22.
Yeah, the number is ridiculous, but I mean, nobody else in that Packers team can even catch a football. So Matthew Golden's going to probably be the safety blanket for Jordan Love, and I wouldn't be surprised if Matthew Golden leads all rookies in receiving yards next year. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Which means there's a really good chance he wins Offensive Rookie of the Year if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, Genty probably be my favorite, but Matthew Golden would be right there too. So a lot of good things to look forward to if you're a Longhorns fan in the NFL. But we're sticking back here with the Texas Longhorns heading into 2025. You want to talk about 5 key freshmen heading into this upcoming season?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. I'm sure we're going to have a couple of repetitive ones. I think the number one on our list is going to be Justice Terry.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think we can pair these two together because I have them both on here. Lance Jackson is in there for me as well. I think you're going to see both those guys slotted inside on certain downs and then slotted outside on certain downs. I think their NASCAR package where you have basically, all these pass rushers on the field getting after the quarterback. You're going to see these guys slide out to the defensive end spot and rush from there. I think they're going to be really, really good football players for Texas. I actually expect Lance Jackson probably to be a little bit better this year just because I think his body's more built for college right now than Justice Terry, because I believe Justice Terry was either injured or had some type of illness and he lost a bunch of weight. He's still kind of getting his weight back up. But those two guys for me are definitely two guys for Texas that are going to pop off this year and be in that, I think there's going to be like a 9-man rotation, 10-man rotation at the defensive line. And I think those are going to be two of them.
Yeah, Texas is genuinely 3 deep in every single defensive line position, whether it's Jack, the Buck, the nose, or interior, any of those spots. They're genuinely about 3 to 4 deep for each spot. I'm not saying that Lance or Justice are going to get 30 snaps a game, but they may be 10, 15 snaps a game and just go out there and make a few plays. We saw that last year where Colin Simmons starts off and he's the backup edge. He gets about 20 snaps, and then slowly but surely he starts taking over that role. I could see a world, maybe not this year, but where next year Justice Terry becomes almost undeniable. He is just an absolute freak of nature, one of the top prospects for a reason. And then Lance Jackson ended up as a 5-star too on some scouting sites, and he's got the size you mentioned. He's just so long and lengthy and powerful. It's just going to be about understanding the nuance, getting the bend and pass rush plan set up. And once those guys get out there, it's going to be just raw athleticism out there. But as they develop and really get going, they're just going to be even better players down the line.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear Landon Jackson, his brother who played for Arkansas, believe got drafted in 3rd round in the NFL draft. And he says he's better than me. That's really all I need to know. And he's physically more built. I think Landon Jackson's only like 6'3". I think Lance Jackson is 6'5", 275 already. So, the guy's ready to play physically right now. It's the question of, do you understand your assignment at all times? Because obviously you want to be a sound football team on defense, because one misassignment, someone can take it to the house, especially first week of the season versus Ohio State. But I agree. I think slowly being put into the frying pan and into the fire is what's going to happen. We saw that, like you said, with Colin Simmons. Colin Simmons never started a game last year. I don't think people realize that. He had 325 snaps the whole year. So I think you're going to kind of see that with those two guys. And you don't need to do that. Again, you're deep there, so you don't need to just throw them in and live with mistakes. So bring them along slowly.
Yeah, for sure. And the nice thing about the Texas schedule, I don't see a world where Jackson nor Terry play a whole lot in week 1 versus Ohio State. No. It's just probably not going to happen unless, they go out there and do some crazy things. But the next 3 weeks after that, when you have 3 really easy cupcake wins, and you could throw out a Justice Terry and a Lance Jackson for 20 snaps a game and, really get them some in-game experience.
No, 100%. I completely agree. I think Gerald and I have talked about that. You basically have 3 scrimmages after Ohio State, and I think that's how Texas is going to treat it. I think you're going to see the starters for a quarter and a half get that lead up by 21 points, if not more, and then you're going to see a deep, heavy rotation. You're probably going to see 60 guys play in those 3 games.
Yeah, you're going to see a whole lot of people playing it. Probably, I would be shocked if every single freshman gets some sort of reps. Maybe not a ton, but at least a couple. So yeah, a lot to look forward to. San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston. What are we talking about? Those should all be really easy games there for us. My next one, and this one is for different reasons than a Landon Jackson a Lance Jackson or a Justice Terry. I put Nick Brooks. I think that the Texas team, after the injuries, are a little bit thin in the tackle room. And, obviously Jaden Chapman is there. He's probably going to be one of your backup tackles. But then outside of that, it's probably Nick Brooks. And, I think there's going to be moments where maybe, let's say, Brandon Baker has a rough game, and you might need to say, okay, who's the next guy up? Maybe we need to throw out Nick Brooks here and there. We talked here a second ago about that little stretch of games that's really easy. I think that could be a great spot for a Nick Brooks to go out there and really show his worth. He's extremely big, and he's a very raw player. But I could see him having some sort of impact. Tackles are a position, and, knock on wood, of course, but a lot of times tackles can get a little injured and banged up here and there. We saw it last year with Cam Williams, and even Banks was dealing with a few things here and there. And, I could see a world where Nick Brooks goes out there and, even there's a stretch later in the season too, where you have Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. Those are going to be SEC teams, so you're not going to start those guys. But I could see a world where Texas gets up big at some point, and then Nick Brooks gets his little time to shine.
No, I don't disagree with that. I think it's interesting because going into this fall camp, I thought there'd be like a heavy competition with Nick Brooks to start. Like that's kind of what we were hearing behind the scenes. And then all of a sudden it wasn't him. It was Andre Kojo, who was the guy like, oh, it's Andre Kojo and Brandon Baker. I thought that was kind of weird because everything and all the reports pointed to when people watched him at practice and the coaching staff said he's going to be a future first round pick, you kind of assume he's going to start to push for that job pretty early. And I think the off-field incident might have had something to do with that not happening. And I think that's going to be something to watch is when does he come into these football games? Is he in that next man up rotation? Like when they pull out the starters in those 3 games, is he the one out there at right tackle or left tackle? If he's not, then that's going to tell me that he's kind of in the doghouse still with the staff because he has the talent to play in that second rotation. So I do agree. I think you need to get him his reps and see what he can do. We'll see what he can do if he does get the reps that we expect him to get. Next up for me, I'm going to have Khalil Lockett. So I'm super high on Khalil Lockett. I actually, this is a super hot take because no one else believes this. I think he's better than DeCorian Moore coming out of high school. I know that's crazy because DeCorian Moore is fantastic, but the ability to high point a football, land on your feet, and then run away from people, that is not a common thing. A lot of people some people can high point the ball. Some people can go get the ball. And then when they land, they usually fall on their back. This kid does not. He high points the football, lands on his feet, and continues to run. That is a very rare trait to have, especially as a senior in high school. And I think he's going to continue that at Texas. And we heard, I guess, in the scrimmage this Saturday, he went off and he was mentioned today. Michael Tapp is a guy that had a really good scrimmage. So I expect a somewhat good year from him. Like Ryan Wingo in a less deep room, more talented, but less deep, in my opinion, last year had 400 and I think 30 yards receiving and about 500 yards total. So I think Khalil Lockett's probably not going to hit that. I could see 300 to 400 yards though for him this year.
Yeah, Khalil is a high point monster. I think in the red zone, especially if Wingo or Emmett Mosley can't quite, be consistent there, I wouldn't be shocked if in that little 3-game stretch, Texas does some packages when they get into that red zone and just say, hey, Arch, go find Khalil Lockett in the red zone and see if he can make some plays. And if he does, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being, a part of your red zone package at some point just because of that high point ability. And that could be a major threat for defenses when you get to the red zone. And that could open up so much more for you because if Khalil just dominates in the red zone with those 50-50 balls, at some point they're going to have to maybe double cover him or put their best corner on him. And that gives guys like Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, or even the rushing game to really get going in the red zone. So, Khalil, maybe not right now, but he might end up being a part of how Texas can unlock their red zone offense, which has been kind of a struggle for them.
No, 100%. I'm in love with Khalil Lockett. I think he's going to be a really good football player. And I think if you wanted to, you could probably throw Dalen McCutcheon in that too, because we heard actually a lot more from him early on in camp than any other freshman wide receiver. Now you're starting to hear about Khalil Lockett. So I think those two guys could definitely be key for Texas this year.
Yeah, I almost put McCutcheon on my list. I didn't quite put him in. In fact, I didn't put any wide receiver on my list, but McCutcheon did make a lot of plays earlier. He's a bit more of a technician. And Khalil Lockett's a bit more of your freak of nature. My next guy was where am I at here? My next guy was Grayson Littleton. I think he is somebody that will probably play in the nickel is where I'd imagine where he's going to probably end up. And he's just a really good athlete. He moves. Texas has a kind of a unique secondary where there's so much versatility and flexibility to play these guys kind of all over. Manny Muhammad will probably stick on the outside. And you have Gilbo, who's played a bit inside, a bit outside. Same with Jelani. They'll kind of rotate those guys. You have Kobe Black, who you want to see potentially play on the outside too. But then there's Grayson Littleton, who is a freshman. Corner is one of those positions that's very difficult to master early on. But he has that makeup speed that I don't quite know if Michael Taff has. Taff is probably going to end up playing a lot in the nickel. But Taff is not a supreme athlete by no means. He's just extremely smart and crafty and has the experience to go behind it. Littleton kind of offers you a bit more of that athleticism. So if Texas does get up big, I could see a potential world where, Grayson goes out there and starts at nickel at certain points and, allows a Taft to go back to safety.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because he's been mentioned a lot on 3, I believe like a week ago, mentioned him as like all-American freshman type thing, which, was crazy when I saw it, but apparently the camp buzz is real and I believe it. I mean, he's being mentioned without without it being prompted, like someone is asking who stands out, and he's like the first guy named by players and coaching staff. So I completely agree. He was on my list as well. And this is the question Brandon had as well when we talked, like, do you trust him going out week 1 versus Ohio State in the nickel? Personally, no, I'm not putting him out there in that position, but I also don't think Michael Taft is equipped in that game because that's going to be a lot more vertical stuff from Ohio State, and I don't think he has the foot speed to keep up with those guys in the slot for Ohio State. I think that's more of a Jelani McDonald in the slot type of game with Michael Taft in the back end. I think that makes more sense, but there are different games where you can mix and match between those 3-4 guys at the nickel spot, and I think Grayson Littleton will be in that rotation, so I completely agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. You do not want to start any freshman against Ohio State. If you do, it's not a good look for your offense or defense if you have to start a freshman out there, because unless that freshman is, 5-star number 1. Yeah, Kelvin Banks, exactly. So unless you have that guy, which, if Littleton is that guy, that'd be awesome. But, when you're going up against the Jeremiah Smiths of the world, you don't really want to start guys with inexperience. So that's Grayson.
They could shift Jeremiah Smith into the slot versus Grayson Littleton.
They will. Yeah, they're going to look at it and say, okay, who's their weakest guy, and we're just going to go ahead and do some sort of shift to get Jeremiah Smith, our best player, arguably the best player in college football, up against that weak point for Texas. So that'll all be interesting when we get to week 1. My next one is another cornerback here. It's Cade Phillips. Cade is he's a bit more of a technical guy. He's just very sound in coverage. Reminds me a decent bit of Manny Muhammad in a way. And, we saw a little bit last year later in the season where Jade was so good and dominant that they started to kind of pick on Malik Muhammad occasionally here and there. And I'm hoping that Manny Muhammad is able to learn from that and really step into a bigger role here. But there is that question about who is going to be that opposite corner. You do have Jelani, you do have Jalen, you do have Kobe Black. I think Cade Phillips is just an unbelievable talent. I think that he was one of the top cornerbacks in all of recruiting last year. And I think just his play style, if you want to mirror a Manny Muhammad on one side and to have somebody who looks very similar to him, I could see a world where a guy like Cade Phillips gets on the field quite early.
No, I could definitely see that. I mean, he's also physically ready. I think that's always the number one thing you kind of have to check off. And he's like 6'1", 210 pounds, ready to go out of the box. Just got to, trust him when we put him out there, that he understands everything he sees. Because again, if there's a break in coverage and someone's wide open, you can't be doing that versus teams like Ohio State, Florida, Georgia, stuff like that. So be interesting when they decide, to use him. Especially because I love Kobe Black. I think Kobe Black is going to be a really good football player for Texas. And it's kind of interesting because I thought there would be more of a battle outside, but it kind of seems like Jalen Gilbo kind of silenced everything, and he's going to be that guy out there. So it'll be interesting when Cade Phillips comes in the football game.
Yeah, or do you want to go with yours next?
No, that was another one.
Cool. My last one is Jonah Williams. Now, the weird thing with Jonah is because he plays baseball, he doesn't quite have the, I'm sure the playbook is probably still, something he's still trying to figure out and learn here and there. I'm sure he knows enough of it to get out there and play. My reasoning for putting Jonah on here is just that Texas is moving Taft probably to nickel a little bit here and there. So that opens up another room spot for a safety. You do have Derek Williams. You do have Phil Simi. Zealous Hicks is also there. He could also be somebody who breaks out on the scene. But I think Jonah Williams just has, undeniable talent. He is just a really well put together athlete. He's big, he's strong. I wonder if he can even play within the box at times. I think he can also play free safety. So he has that versatility. The question for Jonah is going to be how much of the playbook does he have down because of the fact that he is really juggling 2 sports at once. And, Texas obviously had a great year in baseball. So for Jonah, I know he had an injury too. I don't know if he's still handling with that injury or what's going on there, but I'm hopeful that he might have a big role this year.
No, I don't disagree. That was a question I had for Brandon. Is it a possibility if we shift him down to linebacker for like dime coverage, for example? I think that's definitely a possibility. Like he'd be light, but he wouldn't be any lighter than Ty Anthony Smith was last year, and you kind of saw him used in that way. So I think there's a possibility for that. I mean, he was listed, I believe, on 3 in the recruiting services as like safety / linebacker. So he was up in the air. I believe Oklahoma was recruiting him as a linebacker. So I think he can do that. And I think like you said, how much does he understand? Because he's really only been here for fall camp. He kind of missed most of spring because he's in baseball. And I think they could use him again in the NASCAR package. Hey, guess what you're going to do? You're going to go get the quarterback here. That's all you got to worry about. Or, hey, you're dropping into this zone. Just drop into this zone. Look, read the eyes. That's all you got to do. You don't have to worry about anything else here. I think you could kind of see that sort of thing, but I don't think they're going to get super confusing with him out there. I think you'll probably see him 5 to 10 plays a game with, he 100% knows his assignment and he should not deviate from that assignment.
Yeah, in the dime,
Yeah.
I really don't know if they're going to run it too often, but in a situation where you want to go a bit more coverage heavy, you could run dime out there. And, I think a Phil Simi also could be a candidate to play that linebacker role because he's also a bit of a bigger guy. Derek Williams is obviously really big too. But I think Jonah, he's right up there. He is a big dude that's physical. He's strong. His safety tape in high school some of it was teaching tape. It was so good. But again, just kind of comes down to, does he have the experience in the camp so far that some of these other guys have?
No, 100% agree.
And to recap my list, I put Justice Terry, Nick Brooks, Grayson Littleton, and Cade Phillips, and Jonah Williams. We also talked about Lance Jackson there a little bit too.
Yep, same list as Lance Jackson.
Yeah, with Lance Jackson. Do you want to hop into some predictions now? We have Texas predictions, we have SEC predictions, and college football playoff predictions. Did you, for the college football playoff ones, did you put who you think your 12 teams will be?
Yes, I put who the 12 teams will be. I wrote it out a little bit more in Gerald yesterday. I literally broke it down. I have the 12 teams. I have the Final Four. I have the national championship.
Cool. I did not go to that extent, but we can run that right here, right now on live. I put down each conference champion. I also put the runner-up as well, and then the last 4 in, as well as a group of 6 team. But let's start off with our Texas predictions. I think for my prediction, I have them going 10-2. I think their loss will come 1 to either Ohio State or Florida. I think those 2 games are really interesting ones. And I think somewhere along the road, because this is such a young team, especially on the offensive end with a new offensive line, new quarterback, there will be a stumble along the way. So I have them going 10-2, which is still obviously really good, and they'll probably still be in the SEC championship game.
Yeah, I'm at 11-1. I have the loss to Florida. I don't feel great about that one just because I don't know about DJ Lagway's health, but I've kind of been feeling that loss for the past 3 months. So I said, I'm just going to ride with it. That's what my gut keeps telling me. I just think with the Ohio State game, they'll win that game because of the coaching continuity that we have. That's the advantage I see in that game over Ohio State because of what they replace. Georgia, I think, takes a step back, and I think we're about the same team that we were last year. And I just trust Archman to hit some vertical shots versus Georgia that Quinn Ewers couldn't. So that's why I have us beating them. But overall, I think there's really only, 4 possible losses on the schedule, maybe 5 if you want to throw in. I do have Oklahoma bouncing back this year. I actually have them in the playoff when we get there, which might piss off some people, Texas fans, but I do have them there. But overall, I expect an 11-1 season from Texas.
Yeah, so I put 10-2, and as I said, I think Ohio State. I also do feel good about the Ohio State game. I fully am predicting Texas to win that game, but that Florida game. By the way, looking at their schedule, their 3 toughest opponents, if we exclude, I don't think A&M or Oklahoma is probably in the top 3, to be honest with you. Florida, Georgia, and Ohio State, all away games next year. Yeah. And we all know Columbus and Ohio, it's going to be buzzing. Florida, going to the swamp, it's going to be buzzing. Georgia, it's going to be loud. It's a to-be-determined game. So if it's at night, it's even going to be louder. So those are 3 tough environments for a young quarterback and Arch to step into. But I do agree with you. I do think Texas has the continuity in the coaching staff versus Ohio State. Plus, Ohio State has a ton of new pieces. So many guys left in the draft. Florida is interesting. They have the quarterback. They kept their head coach. They have some continuity. But, is it hype or is it real? I think we'll figure that out pretty early on because their schedule is pretty tough. And then Georgia, new quarterback, but it's Georgia. They're going to have a good defense. They're going to have their guys ready to go. And Georgia can run with the underdog mindset like they did somehow these past, 10 years. They can run the underdog. They're ranked higher than us. We can get them. And I think that's what you're going to see. So I have Texas going 10-2. I think they'll probably slip up somewhere along the way. I think their biggest trap game, and I think me and Brandon talked about this last time, I mentioned it was Arkansas. I thought Arkansas was a major trap game for them because you have that Georgia matchup. If you won that game, you're coming off a high. And then you're looking forward to Texas A&M the week after that. and then you slip up versus Arkansas. I think Arkansas could be one of those games. Plus, Arkansas hates Texas, and Texas could care less about them. So I could see Texas sort of slipping up there. I'm not predicting that they will. If I was to make a prediction, I'd probably have them winning there, but that would be one of those trap games you'd have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for me, I don't think they're going to lose either of these two games, but I think they're going to be close. One of them is going to be closer than they should be, and that's going to be the back-to-back with Kentucky and Mississippi State.
Oh, yeah.
Just because you're going there. I mean, those are two pretty underrated places to play. Mississippi State because of the cowbells, and then if you look at Kentucky, they always play like Georgia or LSU or Florida tough when they come to Kentucky. So I expect first time going to Kentucky, Lexington, it's an underrated environment. I think that's going to be a little bit rough. The only reason I don't really have Arkansas is because I think by that time Sam Pittman's probably fired. That's
True.
my thing.
Yeah.
I just think there's going to be so much turmoil. If that was earlier, I could definitely see that. And Taylor Green, that's his issue too, is health. Like he's always nicked up and he could be hurt by then as well. I'm also a lot higher on Mississippi State this year than most people. I don't really like Jeff Lebby as a head coach, but he's way better than who they had before in Zach Arnett, and the talent there's better than it was last year. I like Blake Shapen. If Blake Shapen can stay healthy, I think that game's probably going to be a lot closer than Texas fans think it is.
That is fair. And sticking to Texas here, which of our receivers do you expect to lead Texas in receiving yards? I put Ryan Wingo.
Yeah, man, yards is tough because I think Ryan Wingo leads in touchdowns. I don't know if he leads in yards. I would probably go either Jack Andrews or DeAndre Moore. Those would be my two guys in yards.
You think it's going to be more of a committee rather than a number one, number two guy? It's just going to be, we have 5 dudes, 6 dudes who are all going to catch 3 passes for 30 yards, and we're going to make our way downfield.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, because Ryan Wingo has obviously big play like capabilities. So I definitely could see, if he catches 50 balls and he averages, 15 yards a catch, that's 750 yards. And he's super capable of that. So, I mean, he could do that. It's just going to be tough. I see more of like the strength of this team, in my opinion, is the depth of like everywhere. So that's why I think it's going to be by committee.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I put Ryan Wingo to lead it, and then my second one was DeAndre Moore. I kind of went with the guys who are a bit more, have been in the system for a few years. DeAndre Moore could also be a safety blanket too. I think Ryan Wingo, I'm predicting somewhere. I don't think he'll get to 1,000 receiving yards. That feels a little bit rich for my liking. But I think maybe if he can get near 800, that wouldn't really shock me too much. And then DeAndre Moore, I think he'll probably be 700, 600 receiving yards. And, you talked about Parker Livingstone. I think he'll get to 400. I think Jamie French, McCutcheon, Khalil Lockett, all those guys could have 300 yards. Maybe not all of them, but, 1 or 2 of them could have 300 yards in their rookie year. And you talked earlier about Jack Andrews. Jack Andrews could be the guy that, kind of comes out of nowhere and is one of your more productive wideouts out there.
Yeah, Gerald said yesterday one of his hot takes was someone for the first time since I believe Quan Cosby has 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, and he said Ryan Wingo. So I mean, if he gets 1,000 yards, he's going to be the leading wide receiver of the team, no doubt. So he has the capability. When he stepped on campus, Mark asked me about him on his show, and I said I think he's the most talented guy to step on campus at wide receiver since Roy Williams. So
yeah,
he has the talent to do that. It's hard for me to see someone just having, like, even last year, Matthew Golden didn't blow anyone away receiving yards wise, even though I believe I think Gunnar Helm led the team in receiving yards, which is crazy to look at, but it was close. It was like 600 to like 550 something. And then someone else, Ryan Wingo, had 430. So it was like all over the place.
Yeah. I think I kind of tend to agree with you. I don't know if there'll be a number one per se. I just think it's going to be a full-on committee, but if there was to be a number one, it probably would be Ryan Wingo. And I think Ryan Wingo is somebody who has, like you mentioned, ultra talent. My next question, who do you think leads the team in sacks, not named Colin Simmons?
Not named. Ooh. So that's either going to be for me, Anthony Hill, or Brad Spence. I think Brad Spence is going to have a really big year for Texas. Yep. I think you're going to see 7, 8 sacks. My hot take, actually, one of them was, I think there's going to be 5 guys for Texas that have 5+ sacks, which is crazy to say.
Do you have the 5 on top of your head, or
so 2 guaranteed are Colin Simmons, Anthony Hill. You're going to get that. Yep. Then I believe Ethan Burke last year had 3.5 or 3. I think he ups that to 5 this year. I think Brad Spence had 4.5 at Arkansas, and he was only edge part-time. He'll get there. So those are 4, like, I feel very confident in. So I need one guy to hit between Lance Jackson, Justice Terry, Zena Umluzulu. Can they slide Trey Moore down enough to where because if he's down there enough, he will get 5 sacks.
Colton Vasek.
Yeah, Colton Vasek. That's what I'm saying. There's just so many guys. I think you're going to have 5 guys get 5+.
And you could probably see, a Cole Brevard, I know a bit more run stuff for maybe an Alex January. Maybe they could get 3 sacks down there. And, by the end of the year, this team could be one of the top, teams in sacks out of all the college football teams. So, my personal money would also be on Anthony Hill, just because they're going to use him in so many different ways. And then I also agree with you. I think Brad Spence is kind of that next guy who can also get there. I think Trey Moore is still in contention for it. I know he is going to probably play a bit more as an off-ball linebacker, but I can see a world where Texas says, okay, we'll put you on the edge here and there and just go out there and make some plays, and I think he will. But for Colin Simmons, reason why I took Colin Simmons out, Colin Simmons is going to probably have 10+ sacks next year. Like, he's going to be that guy. My next one, we talked about the running backs a bit earlier. Which running back do you think leads Texas in rushing yards, and how many yards?
So I believe I said last week, and I'll stick to it. I don't know if I believe it as much this week because CJ Baxter's, update, but I think I said Christian Clark, and I think I said like 600 to 700 yards. I hate this because I feel like I'm the absolute hater on Trey Wisner. I'm just lower because I don't see him as a number 1 back on a championship team. I've said that since the middle of last year. I said our run game wasn't good enough to win a national championship last year, and I got called an idiot and hater by Texas fans saying you're wrong. And I was just like, I'm just showing you the numbers because I took the last 10 champions and showed their best running back, and then as a whole what their team did rushing, and Texas didn't even come close in either of those aspects, yards per carry wise. So I think you're going to have to transition to more of a Christian Clark, or if CJ Baxter's healthy. Like, if CJ Baxter's healthy, he's leading the team in rushing. I don't think that's a question. Like, he's the best running back on the team if he's healthy. But I'm going to stick to what I said last week, and I think it's going to be Christian Clark.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with a bit of a boring answer here. I think Trey Wisner starts off as your lead back. And then I think as Baxter gets a bit more explosive and ready to go, I think Baxter will eventually take over the role. And then I think you'll see Christian Clark and Jarrett Gibson, maybe even a James Simon. I kind of doubt it. He's a freshman, but maybe he gets a couple snaps here and there. I think CJ eventually will take over that lead back role. I think he will ultimately come second. I think Trey will get enough work in the early portion of the season to lead the team in rushing yards, but I think his first half production will be more than his second half production. So, but this is kind of a nice problem to have when you have 4 guys that you all think, that we all think could go out there and generally make a lot of plays.
No, 100%.
Okay, let's move over to the SEC. For each, I went ahead and ranked them from number 1 all the way down to last, and I gave them sort of a range of wins in which I think they will win next year. So my number 1, unsurprisingly, was Texas. I said they'll win somewhere between 10 to 11 wins, and I think they're clearly the front runner in the SEC. My number 2, I put Alabama. I have them at 10 to 11 wins as well. I think Bama has some questions at quarterback, but I think their defense is good enough to really get the job done. And I think defensively that'll carry them to some wins. Plus, they have a Ryan Williams. I think they have the running backs to really be explosive. My last team that I think is a 10 to 11 win caliber team is Georgia. It's Georgia. They have the defense. I think they have the offensive line. Questions at quarterback, I think, will hold them back from becoming, a serious national title contender. But I do think they will probably end up making it into the playoffs. So those are my top 3 teams. And then afterwards, I have South Carolina with 9 to 10 wins, LSU with 9 to 10 wins too, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, both projected 8 to 9 wins. Then I have Texas A&M kind of stuck right in the middle with a bit of a wider range. I have 7 to 9 wins for Texas A&M. I'm just not a biggest believer in their quarterback. I think there will be some question marks there, so hence why they're a little bit lower. I don't think they should be a top 25 team, if I'm being honest with you. Tennessee and Florida, I have both at 7 to 8 wins. Arkansas, Auburn, Vanderbilt, both 6 to 7 wins. And then lastly, I have Missouri, Kentucky, and Mississippi State all as the bottom 3.
Yeah, so Mark has this thing, and this is how I guide my predictions based off this because I think it's super interesting and helpful. So every year, guys, between 4 to 6 teams per conference either have 3 more wins than the year before or 3 less wins. And that's just, he's gone back like 10 years, and that's been the average. So I try to always find like 5 teams that I think are going to have 3 more wins or 3 less wins. So some of these may sound crazy because of that, but my top, I agree. Like I actually have, gonna get hate from this, just like I probably will when the video comes out. But my top 5 teams that will compete for the SEC are, I have Texas winning versus Georgia in the SEC championship game. After that, I have Alabama 3, LSU 4, and I have Texas A&M 5. I think those are the 5 best teams in the SEC. The reason I went with Texas A&M taking that little jump, this is the year, for whatever reason, every year all I hear is A&M's going to do this, A&M's going to do that. I have not heard that from anyone this year. They're ranked, but I don't hear anyone saying, you know what, they're going to win 10 games this year. They're going to win 10 games this year. I've not heard anyone go out on the limb and really say that. I think they're going to win 10 games this year. I think the schedule's super easy. I think their offense is going to take that step forward because of Marcel Reed and Kevin Concepcion, Kevin Concepcion coming over from NC State. And I think they have probably the best tandem of running backs in the SEC, not named Texas. I mean, Le'Veon Moss and Ruben Owens are really good football players, and their offensive line, I think, is going to be pretty good as well. So that's why I have them. Another one of the rivals that I have going well, I think Oklahoma's going to win 9 games. They were devastated by injuries last year, and I have them 6 in the SEC. And I don't think that's going to happen again. I think John Mateer can just be good. If he's just good, they're going to win a lot of games because their defense is really good. The weapons around him are pretty good with Jaden Knott and Burks at the wide receiver positions. I believe Gibson at wide receiver is pretty good as well. So that's where I have them. Florida, to me, my next 2 teams are 7 and 8, Florida and Auburn. They have the highest ceiling and the lowest floor of any teams in this conference. I could see either of those teams go 3 and 9 this year or 9 and 3. It would not shock me because they both have a lot of talent. One with Florida, DJ Lagway, you going to be healthy? If you guarantee me 10 games of health, I think you win 9 of those games, honestly. I think that's how talented he is. I have him as the number 1 quarterback in the SEC personally. And then Auburn, they have literally everything else other than the quarterback. So again, kind of with Oklahoma, can the quarterback be average? And I don't think Jackson Arnold was the problem at Oklahoma last year. I think their offensive line was horrid, and I think the weapons around him all got hurt. And I think that made him look worse than he is. Do I think he's great? No. But if he can be good with the tandem of Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, who I think is the best tandem of wide receivers in the whole country, that's good enough for me. So I have them at 8 wins. Number 9, I have Missouri. Number 10, I have South Carolina. South Carolina is one of those teams I think takes a big step back because they lose all that talent off the defensive side of the ball, and they don't recruit at that elite level to replace that. And you have 2 really good football players, but the problem with that is this is not basketball. It is football. Dylan Stewart can be schemed out of football games. And guess what? If Lenore Sellers can't win games kind of by himself on the offensive side of the ball without Rocket Sanders back there, and unless Nick Harbor finally becomes who he should be, I think you're going to have issues moving the ball on the offensive side. Number 11, I have Tennessee. Again, I think it's going to be a big step back. Already bad stuff coming out of camp about injuries at wide receiver. You're telling me you're going to have all these injuries at wide receiver and replace a quarterback coming in late? He came in the second transfer portal window, not the first. And their offensive line isn't going to be as good as it was last year. It wasn't even that great last year, and they lost a lot of that defensive depth that they had. I don't really believe in Tennessee this year. This is the one where Gerald and I yesterday disagreed the most. He has Ole Miss as like the 6th or 7th team. I am as the 12th. This is the one I'm concerned about. They could be a lot better than this. Like, I'm going to be this is one of those teams. I just had to force someone into this role of 3 wins more, 3 wins less. I am 3 wins less at 6 and 6. So I have them number 12. Number 13, I have a team moving up 3 games, and that's Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State's going to beat Arizona State this year out of conference. They should have beat them last year, guys. They had them beat in Tempe and lost that football game. I think they're going to beat them down in Mississippi this year. So I have them at number 13 in the SEC. And then the bottom 3 are Kentucky, Vandy, and Arkansas. I think Vandy takes a gigantic step back. They talk, especially Diego Pavia, is talking way too much smack, and that puts a target on your back. And let's be honest here, they run a super gimmicky offense that the rest of the league now has a lot of tape on. It ain't going to work as well as it did last year.
Yeah, I have Vanderbilt 4th to last, so I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I have A&M a little bit lower than you do. You have A&M in your top 5, correct?
Yeah, 5th.
I have them where I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have them 8th in the SEC with about 7 to 9 wins, and I'm really thinking 8 and 4 maybe is what I'm really looking at here.
I mean, that's their nickname.
That is their nickname, and the way I'm looking at their schedule, I think they lose to Notre Dame. I think they lose Florida, LSU, South Carolina, Texas. I think they lose 3 of those 4 games there. So I think that's how they get to 8 and 4. There's a world where they do get to 9 and 3. You know, if they manage to beat a Notre Dame, if they manage to beat an LSU and a Florida, and then lose to Texas and South Carolina, and then maybe Missouri or something like that. They could easily go 9-3. Their schedule is not the hardest, but I think in those 5 games, Notre Dame, Florida, LSU, South Carolina, and Texas, I just don't see Texas A&M. Like, they consistently just can't beat those upper echelon teams, and I think that's what's going to happen this year. But I think they're heading in the right direction as a program. They have in my opinion, a solid head coach. I think they have talent around them. They have a nice, young quarterback that I'm not the biggest believer in, but I know he has talent. It's just going to be about, going out there and putting it on the field. They have sort of 2 easy UTSA, Utah State to start off their season. Then they got Notre Dame. So I think they're in the conversation. For me, I'm a lot higher on South Carolina. I have them as my 4th team. I'm a big believer in their coach, and I think Lenora Sellers has all the talent in the world. Now, you mentioned some really good points about the defensive side of things. I think Dylan Stewart will make up a lot of the difference here. And I'm just really high on Lenora Sellers. I think Sellers could have a really big breakout year that makes him one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC. And I think with that coaching staff, with a lot of pressure to win this year because of the talented team they have, I think they can get to about 9 wins next year. LSU has the experience. I also agree with you with Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma's going to get a lot of crap because it's Oklahoma and we're Texas, but they were banged up big time last year, and they get a quarterback that's proven. If he's not suspended because of Venmo, but we'll assume that he's on the team. And they have some really solid weapons. The question for me is going to be on that offensive line.
Yeah.
Can they stay healthy, number one, and just what does the talent look like? If that offensive line can go out there and ball, then I think Oklahoma is going to be really competitive. And I think for Oklahoma, of course, the biggest game every year is that Texas game. But depending on if they win it or how they lose it, I think will tell you a lot about Oklahoma. Because if it's a close game against Texas, and Texas, who we think they are, Oklahoma could be a serious threat to make the playoffs because their schedule isn't the hardest, and Oklahoma is just a really good team. So I have them around 8 to 9-ish wins.
Well, I think week 2 will tell us a lot because that's like the only primetime game with Michigan in them. And I kind of have both those teams when we get to the college football playoff. Those are like in the group of 4 to 5 teams I could see making the college football playoff. And they're very similar. Like, they both have question marks. Offensive line for both teams, young quarterbacks. Well, not young, but John Mateer, unproven at this level. Bryce Underwood, obviously young and unproven. Good running games, good defenses. Who is the wide receiver that can step up for both teams? So they kind of both have question marks there. And I think that's a super entertaining and fun game. And I'm glad it's kind of like the only game of the day. So it's going to be a fun game to watch.
Did Michigan announce Bryce Underwood's a starter? Is that
no, but on here, TJ and those guys, I mean, it's kind of been known. I think Wing Martindale kind of let it slip. They interviewed him during Big Ten Media Day, and he said, we have a really good quarterback. He didn't say we have a quarterback competition. So it's like, I don't think you're talking about Mikey Keene, but I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, but I'm looking at Oklahoma's schedule. They got Illinois State, then Michigan. I don't think Auburn's going to be very good next year because of quarterback play. So if they can handle their business versus Michigan, I'm assuming they're going to lose to Texas. They could head into Texas legitimately 5-0. And to end the season off, it does get a little bit harder, but I think South Carolina will be tough. I'm kind of with you on Ole Miss. I like their quarterback. I know that it's a new guy in there, but I think he's good. I think he can play. But there is some questions there with Lane Kiffin and that team. Tennessee, like you mentioned, a lot of questions there with that quarterback situation. Then you got Bama. I think Bama will be good. Missouri questions, and then LSU. So I think there's a world where OU, I think 10-2 feels a little bit far-fetched. But if they can handle their business and, if they can upset an Alabama, which, they did last year, then I could see a world where Oklahoma has a major bounce back year. So I'm kind of with you there. Do you have your college football playoff ready to go?
Yes, I do. So I will run through that real quick. So number 1, I do have Texas. I think just winning the SEC, like even if Clemson goes undefeated, I still think you kind of have to put a 1-loss SEC team over Clemson because their schedule is really bad after that LSU game. They really only have like 1 or 2 games that, in my opinion, that's respectable matchups. So I have them 1. I have Clemson 2. I have Penn State 3, and I have Ohio State as my top 4 because remember this year you don't have to put Arizona State or Boise State in the top 4 conference championship. You just put the 4 best teams. I do think Ohio State beats Penn State in the regular season, but Penn State beats Ohio State in Indianapolis. I do think that's what we'll see in the Big Ten championship game. And I have Texas winning the SEC championship game versus Georgia. Obviously, I have them winning. I just didn't say who. So after that, I have Georgia 5. I have Bama 6. I have USC 7. And the reason I have USC 7, 17 out of the last 19 years, guys, in college football, a team that was unranked finished the season in the top 10. I think that's going to be USC this year. Again, you have to account for sort of these things, and that's why I'm putting them there. Number 8 and 9, this is going to be crazy. I have Texas A&M versus Oklahoma in the college football playoff. I did realize I do have LSU beating A&M, but they do have a better record, and then LSU will have lost to Clemson, and A&M would have beaten Notre Dame in my scenario. So that's kind of a toss to me. I don't know what they do there. I just put A&M there. Could be LSU. So I have A&M versus Oklahoma. Number 10, I have Kansas State. I do believe Kansas State wins the Big 12. Guess what, guys? You could pick 8 teams in the Big 12. I don't know which one's going to win it. It's crazy there. You can put whoever you want in there, but I'm going to have Kansas State. Number 11 is a team I've only seen one other person have, and it's Duke. I think Duke has a very, very easy schedule. I like Darian Mensah, and I think their defense returns a lot, and they're going to be very, very good defensively. Guys, they have a super easy schedule. The games I'm only concerned about are, I believe, are Clemson and Georgia Tech. If they beat Georgia Tech and they just do what they should do, they're going to go to the ACC championship game, most likely, unless some crazy tiebreaker scenario happens. So I have them 11. Number 12, again, I have to pick a team. I could have picked Memphis. I could have picked Boise State. I went with UNLV and Dan Mullen. They're my 12th team.
All right. So who is your conference champions, just to clarify?
Texas in the SEC, Penn State in the Big 10, Kansas State in the Big 12. And then what conference am I forgetting? ACC. I said ACC, Big 12, ACC, SEC, Big 10. I think that was it, wasn't it?
The group of 6.
Oh, UNLV.
UNLV. Interesting. All right. So for me, my conference champions are Texas for the SEC, Clemson for the ACC, Penn State for the Big 10, and Kansas State for the Big 12. Like you said, Big 12 is just, it could be any of them. My runner-ups, so I have Bama as the runner-up in the SEC. I have Miami, the runner-up in the ACC. I have Ohio State losing to Penn State in the Big 10 championship game. Really giving, I'm giving a lot of rub there to Penn State. And then I have Arizona State is the runner-up to Kansas State. In terms of my rankings, I have Texas at number 1. I have Penn State at number 2. I have Clemson at number 3. Alabama at number 4. Number 5, I have Ohio State. 6, I have Kansas State. 7, Arizona State. 8, I have Miami. 9, I have Georgia. 10, LSU. 11, Notre Dame. And my group of 6 is going to be Boise State. I think there's a lot of veteran experience there. No Ashton Genty, but I still have faith.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfectly fair. Like, it's funny, we agreed on the 4 or 5 conference champions, which I think is funny. Yeah. But out from that, I think it's kind of a guessing game with, group of 6, group of 5, whatever you want to call them. And then also, like, Big 12 is, I don't even know. Arizona State was predicted last in the Big 12 last year, guys. So if you want to predict West Virginia to win the conference or Oklahoma State or UCF, go ahead. It could happen. I don't know, but I have Kansas State.
And who do you have making the college football championship game?
So my final 4, I have Georgia versus Penn State, and I have Texas versus Clemson. Actually, no, so I have Texas versus Georgia, and then Penn State versus Clemson. I have Clemson versus Texas for the national championship, and I have Clemson winning the national championship. So I have Clemson as my national championship pick.
I like Clemson. I think Cade Klubnik's great. I think they have so much talent in that team. I thought Texas really handled them last year. Yeah. They really did. And sure, Texas is different and Clemson has a little bit more experience on them. I really thought Texas handled them, and I thought Texas could have beat them a lot better. They made a ton of mistakes in that game. So for me, my championship game, I didn't go through the bracket. I guess I could run that through. My championship game was Texas versus Penn State, and I have Texas coming out on top. I think Texas is the best team in college football with the most talent. I think they're the deepest in college football. I think there is pressure on Steve Sarkisian, as there is on James Franklin, by the way. But if Franklin makes it to the big, wins the Big Ten, makes that run, I think a lot of the pressure is off his back. I think for Texas, it's a little bit different because they've already made it to the mountaintop in a sense. You won the Big 12 your last year there. In your first year in the SEC, you make it to their championship game. You make it to the third round and come up short. I think this year there is that pressure for Texas to get the job done. You have Arch Manning. You only get an Arch, or you only get a Manning, once ever, right? You only get them once. And so for Texas, there is that pressure. I think they need to, fill it out either this year or next year, assuming Arch comes back. And I think this is the year where there's so many I think there's a lot more openness to, the Alabamas, the Georgias of the world because of their quarterback situations and, the lack of experience in certain teams. I think for Texas, the competition will be Clemson and Penn State. And I think Clemson, I just thought Texas really handled them last year, and I think they can handle them again this year. I do worry about our offensive line versus their defensive line. That could be a bit of a interesting one. But for Penn State, I think they'll be good, and I think they'll be very impressive. I think they'll win the Big Ten. But, it's Penn State. I think they're going to make a mistake at some point, and that will allow a team like Texas to take the advantage on them. I just think Texas has the most talent to go along with continuity, to go along with, chemistry. And, you compare that to some of these other teams. I just think Texas has the advantage on them. So I have Texas going all the way this year. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm not. I think that it's not necessarily a crazy pick. I think most people have Texas going all the way.
Yeah, I think Marcus brought this up, and I agree. I think I've seen Clemson, Penn State, and Texas. Those are like the three. I haven't really seen anyone deviate from that too much. J.D. Patel picked LSU, which I think is absolutely crazy because I've seen nothing from that defense that tells me they're anywhere near championship caliber under Brian Kelly. But, we'll see. That's the best thing about this. You get to make the predictions, look back on them, and see how you did. And I think this would be the year before the year. Like if Texas wins this year, they could they'd have the best chance of going back to back since Georgia did it. I really believe that because next year, this team's going to be unbelievably stacked and there's very few losses that they're going to have.
Yeah. Assuming Arch comes back, that would be the big one. If Arch were to come back, Colin Simmons will still be here. Ryan Wingo would still be here. Anthony Hill would be gone, but you'd have Ty Anthony Smith, your offensive line. Maybe Goosby's gone, but, Brandon Baker's now in his next year. So, yeah, you're right. There would be so much talent. And, I think Texas has a great chance of winning it this year. And if they win it this year, I would like our chance of winning it next year. But let's take it 1 year at a time.
No, 100%.
Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I'm just super excited for Farmageddon on Saturday. Hey, our hopes could die Saturday because if Iowa State beats Kansas State, probably a pretty good chance Kansas State doesn't make the college football playoff.
There it goes. Well, guys, this is a Tuesday live stream. I'm still kind of new to the Voice of College Football, so I will be here every single Tuesday, and Matthew will be around doing his live streams. Which live streams are you going to be on for?
Yeah, so we'll be on Monday night, 8 Eastern time with Gerald every Monday, and then I think we're going to be doing all four of us. I think we're going to be doing the post-game shows. So stick around, guys. Yeah, it's going to be fun with four guys talking it up. We'll probably go hour and a half. Maybe a little bit shorter this Saturday because there's a lot of good college football on, but that's going to be the typical one. And then, if we get enough people in here, hopefully we can start doing what like the Michigan show does where, hey, every $100 super chats, we go. Now, I don't know if I'd be going 12 hours like they do sometimes. That I may call off the dogs after like 4, but we'll discuss that if we get to that point.
Yeah, so we will be live every single post game, and we have live streams throughout the week. So make sure you guys stay tuned for all that. Appreciate you guys for watching, and stay tuned. Thank you, guys.